I never thought betrayal would sound like a lock clicking shut. But that's what I heard on December 23rd, just before midnight. My son, my own flesh and blood, closed the door in my face as if I were a salesman pushing cheap vacuum cleaners. "Dad," he said, voice smooth and cold, "don't stay here this Christmas. You'll ruin the mood. Go find somewhere else to be." The porch light hit his face just right, enough for me to see the smirk that followed. He didn't wait for me to answer, just slammed the door, hard, as though that final thud erased me from his life. Snowflakes clung to my coat. My suitcase sat at my feet, heavy with clothes and medicine I'd packed in case I stayed the week. Inside, the house was alive. Laughter, clinking glasses, the high notes of holiday music. From the street, it looked warm and inviting, wreath glowing, trees shining in the window. But that warmth wasn't for me anymore. My son had made sure of that. I stood on the porch long enough for my hands to go numb. I could have turned back, called an old friend, checked into a cheap motel by the highway. But I didn't. I had another idea. I walked past the houses on Maple Drive, where neighbors hung candy cane lights and blow-up Santas. Past the church, where a choir spilled songs of goodwill into the night air. I didn't feel goodwill. I felt frost working its way into my bones, the kind that keeps you alert, awake. I ended up on Main Street, in front of a tilted lamppost near the frozen fountain. The bench beneath it was crusted with snow. I sat anyway, pulling my coat tighter, letting the cold etch me into a picture people couldn't ignore. And they didn't. Cars slowed. Pedestrians stared. A man with a phone hovered, then hit record. I didn't tell him to stop. By morning, the photo was everywhere. An old man on a bench, suitcase at his side, eyes wide open while Christmas lights blinked behind him. The headline read, "Father forced out before Christmas Eve." It wasn't pity I wanted. It was spotlight. I knew the cameras would do what I couldn't, drag my son's polished reputation straight into the dirt. He had spent years parading me as the beloved patriarch when it suited him. Donations in my name. Speeches about family legacy. Handshakes built on my history, not his. Now the truth had its own microphone. Reporters called by noon. "Mr. Whitaker, is it true your son left you outside?" Neighbors whispered on porches, their carol rehearsals interrupted. The mayor himself issued a statement about family values without daring to mention names. My son was already choking on the smoke of his own fire, and I hadn't even struck the match yet. Because what he didn't know, what no one knew, was that he had no empire left to stand on. Years earlier, when I first saw greed replacing gratitude in his eyes, I moved every asset. The house, the land, the accounts, the investments. All of it signed over to a charitable trust under my control. Not his. Not ever his. He thought he was walking into millions when I died. He thought every holiday toast about continuing Dad's vision was real. He didn't notice the ground beneath him had already been sawed clean away. So when Christmas Eve came, and his house filled with guests, clients, partners, even his church pastor, I decided to give him the gift of truth. I didn't knock this time. I opened the door and stepped in, snow trailing behind me like evidence. Reporters followed, cameras flashing. Gasps rippled through the candlelit living room. There he was, center of it all. A silk tie, a glass of champagne, a smile rehearsed for power. My son, my betrayer. Surprised to see me? I asked, my voice low but steady. The room went still, forks hanging midair. He stuttered, then forced a grin. "Dad, you should rest. This is exactly the time." I cut in. I raised a folder from under my arm. My lawyer, Mr. Dalton, stepped up beside me. His voice carried like a judge's gavel. "Ladies and gentlemen, what you're about to hear concerns fraudulent spending, misuse of funds, and a history of deceit by your host, Mr. Adam Whitaker." Pages flipped. Numbers read aloud. Personal expenses disguised as business write-offs. Loans taken in my name. Partnerships sealed with false promises. One by one, the guests turned pale. Phones buzzed as lawyers and accountants scrambled. His wife's wine glass slipped and shattered. Adam's face drained of color. He tried to laugh it off. "This is ridiculous. My father doesn't know what he's saying." "Oh, I know exactly what I'm saying," I snapped. Every dollar you flashed around town was mine. And it's gone now. You have nothing left to inherit, nothing left to steal. Because the Whitaker assets belong to the Whitaker Foundation. Every cent. The room erupted. His partners stormed out. His pastor looked at him like a stranger. His wife followed, heels sharp against the tile. The music had stopped, but the sound of his world collapsing filled the silence. I buttoned my coat, walked right up to him, looked him in the eye, the same eyes that once begged me for candy at Christmas markets. "You left me without a home," I said, voice steady as steel. "So I left you without a name." The cameras caught it. The words hung in the air, heavier than snow. And for the first time, my son had no answer. The fallout came faster than even I expected. By dawn on Christmas Day, his name was on every local news channel. The clip of me saying, "You left me without a home, I left you without a name," ran in a loop between weather reports and church broadcasts. People didn't whisper anymore. They shouted. "That's the guy who threw out his father." His company's building downtown, all glass and steel, looked different when I passed by later that morning. Workers huddled outside smoking, pretending they didn't see me. On the revolving doors, someone had taped a copy of the morning paper. Headline bold enough to sting: "Whitaker's son exposed as fraud." Inside, he was cornered. Partners demanded explanations. Phones rang with investors threatening lawsuits, and his assistant whispered nervously that the board wanted an emergency meeting. He tried to spin it as family drama, a misunderstanding blown out of proportion. But the cameras had already carved his denial into stone. Christmas dinner at his mansion didn't happen. Half the guests canceled, the other half never replied. His wife packed a suitcase before noon, sliding her wedding ring onto the counter like it was a receipt she wanted refunded. Their kids, too young to understand but old enough to sense a storm, followed her out without looking back. For the first time in his life, my son was truly alone. But he wasn't quiet about it. By the second day, he called me 17 times. Then texts, long, frantic ones mixing apologies with insults. "Dad, this is crazy. You don't know what you've done." Followed by, "You've destroyed your own family's name." And then, "I swear I'll make this right. Just give me a chance." I didn't reply, not because I couldn't, but because silence was sharper than any answer. That evening, I sat in the kitchen of my small rental, the kind of place with uneven tiles and a rattling fridge. The air smelled faintly of pine from a single branch I'd placed in a vase. No tree, no gifts, just me and the echo of a life I used to call mine. I thought back to the boy he once was, the one who begged me to play catch in the freezing yard, who used to sneak into my office chair and pretend to run the business, tiny fists pounding the desk with mock authority. Somewhere along the line, the play acting turned real. Somewhere along the line, he stopped pretending and started believing the empire was already his. That was the problem with giving too much. Kids mistake sacrifice for obligation. By the third day, things got uglier. He tried to claw back control, filed a statement with the press claiming I was senile, confused, manipulated by lawyers with their own agendas. He even waved around medical forms, trying to hint at declining faculties. I almost laughed when I saw it. Declining faculties? I'd been sharper that week than in the last 5 years. And besides, the foundation documents were airtight, signed, sealed, and filed long before his lies caught up. My lawyer grinned when he showed me the stack of evidence ready to crush any countersuit. "Let him bark," Mr. Dalton said. "The courts don't care for noise. They care for paper. And all the paper's on our side." Still, Adam tried. He begged old partners for loyalty, tried to spin pity into strategy. But loyalty bends when money snaps. Within days, contracts were severed, endorsements withdrawn, clients gone. The Christmas tree in his marble foyer burned bright, but his world was dimming fast. And I wasn't done, because there was one more truth to reveal, one more nail in the coffin of his reputation. He hadn't just lived off my money. He had lied about how he built his own. The expensive car, the luxury trips, the startup ventures he bragged about at cocktail parties. Every single one was financed by funds siphoned from accounts he thought I never checked. But I had checked. For years. Quietly, patiently, letting the ledger fatten with evidence. And now, with the city already watching, I gave the files to the journalist who'd first photographed me on that bench. The headline 2 days later was worse than the first. Whitaker's fortune, a tower built on lies. It detailed everything. Lavish vacations listed as business retreats, forged receipts, payouts hidden in shell accounts. His face stared back from the front page, eyes wide, mouth half open, frozen in shame. The board of his company didn't just distance themselves. They voted him out, effective immediately. He tried to storm the meeting, but the guards stopped him at the door. I heard later that he pounded his fists against the glass until his hands bled. The employees inside pretended not to hear. That night, he showed up at my place. Not the mansion, not the office, my modest rental on Willow Street. He banged on the door like a man drowning, voice raw. "Dad, open up. Please. We can fix this. I'll apologize. I'll bring you home. Just help me." I sat inside, lights off, listening to his desperation spill into the winter air. For a moment, I almost opened the door. Almost. Because beneath the rage and arrogance, I still heard the boy who once asked me to leave the hallway light on when storms rattled the windows. But then I remembered the other night, the one where he left me standing in the snow, suitcase at my feet, saying I'd ruin his holiday if I stayed. And I stayed seated. Eventually his pounding grew weaker. His voice cracked, and then silence. When I finally peeked through the curtain, all that remained was his shadow on the snow, shrinking as he stumbled back into the night. Christmas ended not with carols, not with gifts, but with a truth sharper than ice. He thought he'd buried me outside, but he had dug his own grave instead. And this was only the beginning. By New Year's Eve, my son wasn't just desperate, he was dangerous. The city had turned him into a punchline. Memes with his face and captions like, "Nothing says Christmas like throwing out dad," spread faster than snow on the freeway. His old partners posted polite but icy statements about moving in a different direction. Even his country club, the one where he strutted like a king, quietly froze his membership. Adam hated silence, so he fought back with noise. First came the lawsuits. He filed petitions claiming I was mentally unfit and coerced by greedy attorneys. He demanded the court review the foundation documents, insisted I'd been manipulated. His lawyers wore expensive suits, but they had nothing to stand on. The trust had been drawn up years earlier, notarized, witnessed, and recorded with the state. Every signature was mine, every clause airtight. When the judge dismissed his emergency petition within 5 minutes, the reporters waiting outside caught it all. Cameras zoomed in as Adam stormed out, tie undone, shouting, "This isn't over." The clip ran that night with laughter layered over it, like a bad sitcom rerun. Next, he tried the media circuit, a morning talk show, a podcast interview. He painted me as a bitter old man who couldn't accept his success. He told the audience I'd been confused and always jealous. But then the host leaned forward, holding up a copy of the leaked financial records. "Mr. Whitaker," she asked, "can you explain why your personal vacations were billed through your father's accounts?" His smile cracked on live TV. Millions watched his lips tremble before he muttered something about clerical errors. By the time the segment ended, his credibility was buried deeper than a Christmas tree tossed to the curb in January. I thought maybe that would be enough. Maybe humiliation would quiet him. I was wrong, because then came the threats. Anonymous calls at night. Heavy breathing, a slammed receiver. A brick through my mailbox with a note scrawled in thick black marker. "You ruined me. I'll ruin you." I knew the handwriting. Mr. Dalton urged me to file a police report. I did. The officer scribbled notes, shook his head, and said, "We'll keep an eye out." But I could see in his eyes, he already knew the truth. Adam was spiraling, and spirals don't end gently. On January 3rd, the final blow to his image came from someone I never expected, his own wife. She filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences and financial deception. The statement was short, but it hit like a hammer. Overnight, the last piece of his perfect family man persona shattered. The next day, he showed up again, this time not at my rental, but at the steps of the courthouse. He spotted me walking with Dalton, cameras buzzing all around. His face was red, eyes wild, hair uncombed like he hadn't slept in days. "You think this is justice?" he shouted, voice cracking. "You think you're some kind of hero?" People froze on the steps. The cameras swarmed closer. I turned to him, calm as the falling snow. "I don't think anything, Adam. I just know the truth finally caught up." He lunged then, fist half raised. The bailiff stepped in, catching his arm before it could swing. The cameras clicked like machine guns. The photo ran everywhere the next morning. Adam Whitaker restrained by security, his father standing just behind, untouched. I went home that night with a strange calm in my chest. Revenge wasn't supposed to taste sweet, it was supposed to taste like justice. And justice was steady, quiet, cold. But even then, I knew the story wasn't over. Adam wasn't finished fighting, even if all he had left was his own rage. Because when a man loses everything, the only thing he thinks he can still control is destruction. And my son wasn't done trying to burn the house down. I should have known Adam wouldn't stop at shame. He'd never been good at swallowing failure. As a boy, if he lost at chess, he'd throw the pieces across the room. Now, stripped of his company, his marriage, and his reputation, he wasn't just angry. He was cornered. And cornered men claw. It started with whispers. I heard from Dalton first. "Your son's been meeting with some questionable people," he said, sliding a folder across the table. Inside were photographs, grainy, but clear enough. Adam leaning across a bar table with a man everyone in town knew as a fixer. Not the kind who repairs pipes, the kind who buries mistakes. At first, I thought it was just desperation talk. Maybe Adam wanted someone to smear me further, or dig up dirt that didn't exist. But then the threats grew teeth. "My landlord called, shaken. Some guy came by asking for you. Said you owed debts. He didn't leave a card." The next morning, I found my car keyed from bumper to bumper, the word thief carved into the hood. But Adam miscalculated. He thought fear would shrink me. He forgot fear only sharpens a man who has nothing left to lose. That week, I took a step he never saw coming. I invited the press into my living room. Reporters, cameras, microphones cluttered the small space. I sat at my worn oak table, coffee mug in hand, and spoke straight. I am not the one under investigation. My son is. And if anyone thinks intimidation will silence me, they don't know what family has already done. The story went national. Overnight, Adam's private ward turned public again. Now it wasn't just our city watching, it was the whole country. He became a symbol of greed run amok, a fallen golden boy whose Christmas scandal had grown into a morality tale. That should have been the end. But no, he played his final card. 2 weeks later, Dalton got a call from a contact in the DA's office. They had received a dossier, anonymous, accusing me of embezzlement, fraud, elder abuse against myself, if you can believe it. The documents were sloppy, signatures forged, numbers pulled from nowhere. But Adam had clearly burned his last bridge. He had tried to make me the criminal. Dalton handled it. Within 48 hours, the accusations collapsed. Too many holes, too many obvious fakes. Still, the attempt revealed something important. Adam had someone feeding him paperwork. Someone with access. That someone turned out to be a board member he once called a friend. A man named Kessler, sharp as a knife and just as dirty. He had stuck with Adam longer than most, hoping to ride the fortune wave. When the wave crashed, he jumped into Adam's lifeboat. Together, they thought they could drag me down. But alliances built on fear are brittle. The moment the DA's office sniffed around Kessler, he cracked. Sold Adam out in a heartbeat. Documents, recordings, even text messages where Adam begged him to ruin the old man. And just like that, Adam wasn't just a scandal. He was a criminal. The indictment came on a Tuesday morning, cold and sharp as broken glass. Wire fraud, forgery, attempted extortion. They handcuffed him at his condo while neighbors filmed from their balconies. I should have felt relief, maybe even triumph. But standing on the courthouse steps that afternoon, watching my son drag past reporters, head down, I only felt hollow. Because revenge had teeth, yes, but it also left bite marks. He looked at me once, just once, through the crowd. Eyes bloodshot, face pale, lips trembling around words he never spoke. And for a fleeting second, I didn't see the man who betrayed me. I saw the boy I'd carried on my shoulders to see fireworks, the one who once whispered, "Don't let go, Dad." But I had let go. He made sure of it. That night, I sat alone in my rental, snow falling thick outside the window. The city was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels like judgment. I poured myself a glass of bourbon, let the burn remind me I was still alive. Adam had burned everything. His business, his marriage, his name. And now he was dragging his last ally down with him. But I couldn't shake the question echoing in my chest. When the fire finally died, what would be left of me? Revenge was supposed to be clean. Instead, it felt like ash on my tongue. But the story wasn't finished. Adam's arrest wasn't the end. It was the start of the darkest chapter yet. Because a man with nothing left to lose doesn't stop fighting, he explodes. And I knew the explosion was coming. I thought the arrest would end it. Chains on his wrists, cameras flashing, his name dragged through the courthouse like mud on boots. That should have been the last page. But I'd forgotten one thing about Adam. He never played fair. Jail didn't break him. It fueled him. Within a week, whispers spread that he was cutting deals inside, making friends with the kind of men who didn't care about stock portfolios but knew how to move money in the shadows. A guard told Dalton that Adam never sat quiet. He bragged about the empire he'd rebuild, the enemies he'd crush. And at the top of that list, always, was me. "Your son isn't waiting for trial," Dalton said grimly, laying down another folder of notes. "He's plotting. He's got outside help, too. People who still think they owe him favors." Outside help. That phrase sank into my chest like ice water. I started noticing things again. A car idling too long near my block. Strange calls at midnight that ended the moment I answered. Once, I found an envelope wedged into my doorframe. Inside, only one photo. Me, walking home from the grocery store, a bag of apples under my arm. Someone was watching. But Adam didn't stop at threats. He aimed for something worse. He filed a countersuit from jail, accusing me of asset theft. His lawyers claimed the foundation I created was fraudulent, that I'd siphoned wealth from the company to enrich myself. They even dared to say Adam had been the victim all along. The move wasn't about winning. It was about noise. He knew every headline with our names side by side chipped away at my dignity. Whitaker family feud deepens. Father versus son in bitter legal war. Strangers debated us on talk shows like we were characters in a soap opera. I kept my head down, but inside the fury burned. He wasn't just trying to destroy me. He wanted to drag me into the pit with him. And then he made his boldest move yet. On the night before his bail hearing, the news stations ran a leaked video. Adam, in an orange jumpsuit, speaking straight into the camera. His voice calm, rehearsed. "My father abandoned me years ago. Everything I did was to keep our family's name alive. He's not the victim. He's the thief. He gave away what generations built just to spite me. And if you think I'll stop fighting, think again." The clip went viral. His supporters, yes, unbelievably, he had them, called me a tyrant, a manipulator. People who knew nothing about me filled comment sections with venom. Selfish old man. Probably jealous of his son's success. For a moment, I felt the ground shift. I'd won the truth, but Adam was winning the noise. Dalton tried to calm me. "He's desperate. Don't let him bait you. Courts listen to facts, not tantrums." But I knew better. Facts weren't enough anymore. Adam was too loud, too reckless. He'd set the stage for something bigger. That something arrived 2 nights later. I came home to find my front door cracked open. A thin line of cold air seeped into the hall. My heart kicked hard as I pushed it wide. Inside, drawers were pulled out, papers scattered across the floor, cabinet doors flung open. Someone had searched the place. I called Dalton first, then the police. Nothing obvious was missing, but I knew what they'd been after. The foundation's documents, the originals stored in my desk until court. Dalton shook his head. "He's not even subtle anymore. He's sending you a message." The cops dusted for prints, found nothing. I wasn't surprised. Adam still had people on the outside willing to get their hands dirty. That night, sitting in the wreckage of my small rental, I felt the weight of it settle on me. This wasn't just revenge anymore. This was war. And war has casualties. The next morning, I checked myself in the mirror. My eyes were bloodshot, my face gaunt from too many sleepless nights. For the first time, I wondered if Adam's plan was working, not in the courts, not in business, but in my chest. He wanted me exhausted. He wanted me broken. But I wasn't. I poured myself coffee, steadied my hands on the mug, and whispered into the quiet. If he wants war, he'll get it. But I choose the battlefield. And that was the moment I stopped waiting for Adam's next strike. It was time to take the fight straight to him. For weeks I'd been playing catch-up, patching windows he broke, answering rumors he planted, sitting in silence while he shouted through microphones. But after the night I found my apartment ransacked, after seeing my own photo stuffed into an envelope like a warning, I decided something simple. I wasn't going to take another step back. Dalton leaned across his desk, hands folded. "You're ready to hit him?" "I'm done waiting for him to hit me," I said. "We stopped playing defense. I want offense. I want Adam cornered so tight he can't breathe." Dalton studied me for a moment, then pulled a thick folder from his cabinet. "I was wondering when you'd say that. I've been holding material in reserve. The kind that ends careers, not just lawsuits." Inside were receipts, emails, offshore ledgers. Not the petty frauds everyone already knew about. These were darker trails. Money funneled through shell accounts in Belize, payments slipped to city officials, even wire transfers that linked him to companies under federal investigation. Adam hadn't just stolen from me. He'd corrupted everything he touched. I closed the folder slowly, feeling the weight of it in my hands. "Leak it." Dalton nodded once. "It'll get messy. Once this goes public, there's no taking it back." "There's nothing left to take back," I replied. 2 days later, the mess exploded. Every news channel in the state ran the same headline: Whitaker Web of Lies, Offshore Accounts, Bribes, and Fraud. Commentators lined up to tear Adam apart. One by one, his last defenders abandoned him. Politicians who had once posed for photos at his holiday parties now acted like they'd never shaken his hand. Even his lawyer looked pale outside the courthouse, mumbling no comment into a sea of microphones. The public, hungry for spectacle, devoured it. He wasn't just the son who'd kicked out his father. He was now the face of corruption. But the real reckoning came inside the courtroom. It was a bail hearing, technically routine. But the prosecution walked in carrying the files Dalton and I had handed over. They didn't just stack them on the table. They paraded them like trophies. Emails printed in bold. Copies of offshore account statements. A photo of Adam himself signing documents that redirected company funds into his private consulting ventures. The judge read silently for a long time, his brow tightening with each page. When the prosecutor finally spoke, her voice cut like glass. "Your Honor, these aren't mistakes. These are deliberate acts of fraud." The defendant bragged about using his father's accounts as his personal bank. His own words confirm it. Then she read one of the emails aloud. Adam's exact phrasing: "The old man doesn't check. I'll drain what I want." The courtroom gasped. Pens froze over notepads. The sound of it was louder than any gavel. Adam jumped to his feet, red-faced. "That's out of context. He's twisting this. My father, he's behind it all. He wants me destroyed." The judge slammed his gavel so hard it echoed. "Sit down, Mr. Whitaker. Save your theatrics for trial." For the first time, I saw my son falter. His hands shook as he lowered himself back into the chair. He looked around the room, desperate for one ally, one friendly face. There were none. He found me instead. Our eyes locked. His stare was wild, but beneath it I caught something he hadn't shown in years: fear. Outside, reporters swarmed as Adam was led back in chains. Cameras flashed. Voices shouted questions. I didn't hide. I stood tall, the snow catching in my hair. One reporter shoved a microphone close. "Mr. Whitaker, do you feel vindicated?" I met the lens head-on. This isn't vindication. This is truth. My son threw me out into the cold to hide his lies. Now the cold belongs to him. That clip ran everywhere that night. Across state lines. Across oceans. Subtitles in languages I couldn't read scrolled beneath my words. For once, I didn't feel hollow. I felt steady. But steady isn't the same as safe. Because as they dragged Adam out of court, he turned his head just slightly, just enough for me to see his mouth form 3 words. No sound, but I read them clear. This isn't over. And I knew he meant it. Adam still had one weapon left, the desperation of a man who'd lost everything. And men like that don't surrender. They explode. When a man has lost everything, his last trick is chaos. I knew at the moment Adam mouthed those 3 words, "This isn't over," on his way out of the courtroom. His eyes weren't just furious. They were wild, the kind that says a man is willing to take everyone down with him. And he did. 2 nights later, the city shook with the sound of sirens. Adam's condo, a sleek glass palace he still clung to, was on fire. Neighbors said he'd been seen dragging files into the living room, dumping them into a pile, dousing them with liquor. He hadn't even tried to leave when the flames spread. The firefighters hauled him out half-conscious, coughing smoke, screaming that they won't take anything from me. The news cameras caught it. His hair singed, his wrists cuffed, his voice ragged. They replayed the footage every hour, the fallen golden boy torching his own empire. But destruction wasn't his only plan. Dalton called me the next morning, face grim. He filed a statement from the hospital. Claims you orchestrated the fire to silence him. I laughed bitterly. Silence him? He's screaming louder than ever. Dalton didn't smile. Be careful. He still has people out there. Loyalists. If he can't win in court, he'll try to win in fear. The warning came true faster than I expected. That evening, as I walked home with groceries, a car rolled up slow beside me. The window slid down. A young man, face hidden under a hoodie, muttered, "You should watch yourself, old man." Then the tires squealed, and he was gone. It wasn't just noise anymore. It was a signal. Adam had found pawns willing to play dirty. I slept with a chair jammed against the door that night. Not because I was afraid of dying. I was afraid of letting him write the ending. But the truth has a strange way of surfacing when you least expect it. 3 days later, Kessler, the board member who'd once sided with Adam, walked into the DA's office with a suitcase full of documents. Bank transfers, recordings, even voicemails Adam had left him. One of them played on the evening news. Adam's voice, hoarse but clear. "If I go down, so does my father. I'll burn us both." The city gasped. The country listened. And suddenly, it wasn't just me versus Adam anymore. It was Adam versus everyone. The DA moved fast. New charges stacked higher than the courthouse steps. Arson, obstruction, conspiracy. Bail revoked permanently. Adam wasn't walking out of those bars again. Still, even locked away, he managed to reach me. A letter, scrawled in his uneven hand, delivered through legal mail. "You think you've won. But remember this, you taught me everything I know. Every trick, every lie, every mask. If I'm a monster, you built me." I sat with that letter for a long time, the paper trembling in my hand. Maybe he was right. Maybe all the years of protecting him, cleaning up his small mistakes, pretending his selfishness was just youth, maybe that had planted the seed. But if I had built him, then I was the only one who could tear him down for good. The final hearing was set for March. The prosecution promised to present everything: fraud, theft, bribes, the fire. And they wanted me to testify one last time. Not as a victim, as a witness to the rot inside my own bloodline. That night, I stood at my window, snow falling steady outside, and whispered to the dark, "So be it. You left me without a home, Adam. I'll leave you without a future." Because revenge wasn't finished. The stage was set for the final blow. The courthouse was packed that morning. Cameras on the steps, reporters shouting questions. The air so cold each breath turned white. March had come, but winter hadn't loosened its grip. It felt fitting. Inside, the walls hummed with whispers. People weren't here for justice. They were here for a spectacle. My son had become the city's favorite tragedy, and I was the reluctant co-star. When they brought Adam in, shackles clinking, the room fell silent. His suit was wrinkled, his face thinner, but the arrogance was still there, flickering like a dying bulb. He scanned the benches until his eyes locked on mine. For a second, I thought I saw a boy again, the same boy who once begged me to lift him onto my shoulders at Christmas parades. But then his mouth twisted, and the boy was gone. The prosecution opened with fire. Recordings, transfers, witnesses. Kessler himself took the stand, hands shaking as he admitted how Adam had pulled him into the schemes. Each revelation was another nail hammered into my son's coffin. Finally, it was my turn. I walked to the stand slowly, every step echoing. The oath felt heavy on my tongue. I'd never imagined I'd testify against my own blood. But the truth deserved a voice, even if it broke me. The prosecutor's questions were sharp, but my answers were sharper. Yes, Adam had access to accounts. Yes, he used my name without consent. Yes, I'd moved everything into a foundation years ago, knowing greed would one day come knocking. When the defense tried to paint me as bitter, senile, manipulated, I leaned forward and cut them off. My son didn't fall into temptation, I said. My voice was steady, steel through glass. He walked into it with open arms. And when he ran out of money, he threw me out into the snow so he wouldn't have to look me in the eye. That's not confusion. That's character. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Even the judge's gavel couldn't quiet the weight of those words. Adam snapped then. He leapt to his feet, shouting, "You're lying. You always wanted me to fail. You're jealous of me." His voice cracked, desperate, shrill. Guards pulled him back into his seat, but the damage was done. The jury saw him. Not the businessman, not the polished heir, but the unraveling fraud he really was. Hours later, the verdict came swift, guilty on every count. Fraud, bribery, arson, conspiracy, decades in prison. The judge's gavel slammed down, final as a coffin lid. The room erupted, reporters scribbling, people whispering, some shaking their heads in disbelief. Adam sat frozen, jaw slack, eyes wide like he couldn't believe the empire he built on lies had finally crumbled. I stood slowly, my knees stiff, but my voice steady. I walked past him as they cuffed his wrists again. He didn't look up at first. When he finally did, his eyes burned with a mixture of rage and something else, something almost like pleading. I leaned just close enough for him to hear me. "You left me without a home," I whispered. "So I left you without a name." He flinched, as if the words cut deeper than the sentence just handed down. Outside, cameras flashed, microphones shoved at my face. Reporters begged for a statement, a headline. I gave them one sentence. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. And then I walked down the courthouse steps, snow crunching under my shoes, the cold air sharp and clean in my lungs. For the first time in years, I felt lighter. Adam had tried to bury me in silence, in shame, in snow. But I hadn't just survived. I'd answered. And now the world would remember my truth long after his lies turned to dust. I went home to my small rental, poured myself a bourbon, and watched the snow fall steady outside the window. The city was quiet, the kind of quiet that isn't judgment but peace. And I knew this was the last chapter. Because revenge isn't fire or fury. It's a single line spoken at the right time, so sharp it leaves an echo. He left me without a home. I left him without a name. And that was enough.